He's a college student studying at the University of Montana. He's majoring in economics and mathematics, but his real passion is his participation in the climate change studies program there. And he hopes that after his graduation, he can use his economics background to design policy solutions for the climate crisis. He's from Kirkland, graduate of Lake Washington High School, and his dad, Brad, is sitting next to him there. Thank you so much for coming, Matt. We met at the fundraising breakfast for Climate Solutions, where he was handing out programs and showing people the way to the bathroom and all that really important stuff.
Thank you guys for having me today. I was at the Climate Solutions breakfast as a volunteer because as a college student, any way I can get into a free breakfast is definitely a good option. But like you said, my real passion is climate change, and so this program that you guys are putting on is amazing, and I'm really excited, hopefully, to come to more of these in the future, because talking about climate change and having a connection with faith, I think, is a really important topic. The topic for today is Beyond Fear. And so I was going to kind of walk through my story with how I kind of became passionate about climate change and kind of hopefully connect it to moving beyond fear as well. So I actually became really interested in climate change when I was in the 3rd grade. It was right around the time when Al Gore and the IPCC released their 3rd report, and it was kind of in the news for the first time really seriously in a long time. People were talking about it. Both presidential candidates at the time had a climate plan in their party platform. People were talking about it in the media and in pop culture life. And we learned about it in my school. Like, we learned about the science of the greenhouse effect as 3rd graders and kind of explained it with an actual greenhouse and how that keeps the plants warm and keeps humans and life on Earth warm. And understanding these concepts, looking back on it, and how much science I know now about climate change, understanding those concepts as a 3rd grader was pretty unimaginable, honestly. But I guess never underestimate the knowledge that your kids really have to understand those concepts. That was a big reason why, The Inconvenient Truth came out at that time, and that was a big reason why I got into climate change. But the other reason was the Disney Pixar movie WALL-E, which I don't know if you guys have ever seen before. It's a pretty good movie. That came out around the same time too, and it painted a real different picture than I was used to. It was a Disney movie about humans had polluted the earth so much. There's pillars of trash that look like skyscrapers. Humans abandoned the earth in a spaceship 700 years past in the future. The planet is uninhabitable by life until this robot WALL-E finds a plant that's growing on Earth for the first time in centuries. And so he finds life on Earth and he brings it to the people who have all grown really fat and are using technology and have lost all connection with their home, their common home of Earth. And WALL-E shows them the plant. They end up going back to Earth and rebuilding the planet from the ground up, from a polluted mess, uninhabitable by people. They end up letting it recover and bring life back to Earth. So as a 3rd grader, this hits hard. I was able to understand humans had such an effect polluting the Earth that they were no longer able to inhabit it. I understood how dramatic that must have been. It was scary. These two big things that just entered my life at a 10-year-old age. I understood climate change was happening, and that if we don't do something about it, we're going to end up like the people in WALL-E. We're going to end up without a planet that we share anymore. So imagine going that as a 10-year-old and just the impact that had. I was pretty riled up and scared. I did everything I could to reduce my carbon footprint. I turned off the lights even when I was reading in my room because I was trying to save electricity. I would try to walk everywhere. I think I tried to convince my mom to walk to Seattle from Kirkland. And obviously my parents were really supportive of me. My dad's here with me today, but no, we're not going to walk to Seattle from Kirkland. They're not going to save the carbon that we would emit from the car. I convinced my grandpa. I was also really into investing at the time. I was kind of a geeky third grader, carried around a briefcase, but I convinced my grandpa to invest in Tesla. I was really interested in all these environmental things. And then kind of the weight of climate change, I felt it on, it was so much on my shoulders. It was so much, and I kind of got disconnected from it. I didn't pay much attention to it after 3rd or 4th grade. I went through high school, played sports, wasn't really environmentally engaged a whole lot. And I think that's pretty common with most people. You see this big issue, you get really passionate about it, and then the actual difficulties hit you in the face, and you realize, I can't do anything, and you feel kind of hopeless. And the fear really makes it feel like you can't do anything about it. So I went to college at University of Montana. I'm hoping there's somebody here from University of Montana. There's not. One guy in the back? Yes, go Grizz. Okay, cool. I went to University of Montana, and I was sitting in one of my first college classes, and we have a program at my college called the Climate Change Studies Program. It's one of the only ones in the country that focuses entirely on climate change. It's a minor program offered through the Honors College. Anyways, the director comes into my class and offers people to join the program. And it was right then in that classroom that all the passion that I had as a young kid came back. And I was able to, as a young adult, fully kind of comprehend the issue more clearly. And I was all on board. I didn't know what I was going to study in school. I switched my major 7, 8, 9 times. I would do it again, but it's expensive to go to school, and I have to kind of make a decision. So I knew I was really passionate about climate change, but I didn't know where my role fit into it. And that was fine. I just went through the minor, I took classes that way, and eventually I settled on doing economics and mathematics as kind of my tool set that I was going to use to combat climate change. I've always had a passion for numbers and math and love solving problems, and I thought, why not try to solve the biggest problem out there that I see in the world, which is climate change. I think economics and math really do draw connections to climate change. You have to be able to explain how it is more economically effective to combat it now than it is 10, 20 years down the road. When you put these big numbers in front of people, I think it's something like $50 trillion will be lost if we don't take action. If we continue with business as usual, it'll cost the world $50 trillion over the next 30 years. It's hard to even wrap your mind around $1 trillion, $1 billion, $1 million, but $50 trillion over 30 years is pretty huge. And a lot of times climate change has emotional connections, you picture the polar bear on the melting ice cap, or refugees. And I think tying numbers in with that, with those emotional pieces, really kind of grounds the conversation and can maybe kind of give some relief almost through the certainty that numbers bring. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going on, graduating in December, and I'm hoping to use my economics and math background to build some policy solutions, work for some government, some campaign, and hopefully be on the cutting edge of those solutions. But so to bring it back to being beyond fear, both learning about climate change and my individual actions I could take through turning off lights, turning off the faucet to save water, not driving in my car, riding my bike instead. That's a type of fear that really puts the burden on you individually. You're in it alone. The actions that you do determine the fate of the world, which is pretty ridiculous. You driving a car once can be the tipping point that will cause climate change. That's a huge weight to take on individually. And when you think about also with WALL-E, if you always are thinking about this consequential world where it's a dystopia, that humans are no longer inhabiting Earth, that's a fear that shouldn't motivate your passion to solve this problem. So I was about to wrap this up. Basically what I was going to say is, don't put the burden on yourself to solve a problem this big individually. Don't think about what the world might be if you don't, have that motivation of the world will be a worse place if we don't do something, but don't be scared of it. find the community that you guys have here. Like, take the people that are around you and supporting you. Know that they have your backs and we're working together to solve a common problem. And the more people we get in this community that can take action as a collective, calling your representatives, taking action, protesting, being visual as a strong community, and supporting each other while doing it, I think is the best way to combat fear and to overcome this ginormous problem, is as a community. So thank you guys for what you're doing as a church congregation. I think that this is the best starting ground for big solutions for climate change. Thank you guys.
Feels hopeful. Really appreciate what you said. Thank you. Our first reading is from Isaiah, from chapter 44. But now hear, O Jacob, my servant, Israel, whom I have chosen. Thus says the Lord who made you, who formed you in the womb and will help you. Do not fear, O Jacob, my servant, for I will pour water on the thirsty land and streams on the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon your descendants, and my blessing on your offspring. Do not fear or be afraid. Have I not told you from of old and declared it? You are my witnesses. Is there any God beside me? There is no other rock. I know not one.
Our next reading is a poem, The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests, in his beauty, on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Words of Jesus from Luke chapter 21. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth distress among nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, stand up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near.
Finally, a poem by Robert Frost. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice.
Eugene Grabinovich was one of the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project, leading to the development of the first nuclear bomb. He told the story about how one day he was walking down a street in Chicago with some colleagues, and suddenly found himself imagining the sky lit up by a giant fireball, the steel skeletons of skyscrapers bending into grotesque shapes, until a great cloud of dust rose and settled into the crumbling city. His imagination took what had been theoretical to him and made it vividly real. Now, before that, mostly he had felt excited about being so cool, so brilliant, They are on the edge of discovery with other brilliant young physicists. Their achievements were coming fast and thick, and they were riding high. But on that afternoon, self-congratulation gave way to the reality of what he was helping to create. He took it upon himself to go to President Truman to beg him not to use the bomb. Set off a demonstration in some remote place to frighten the Japanese into surrender. But for God's sake, Mr. President, don't drop that bomb onto real people. 75 years later, our imaginations conjure different pictures. Journalist David Wallace Wells is ready to help us with the details. It is worse, much worse than you think. That's the cheerful opening of his book entitled The Uninhabitable Earth. And he goes on to paint nightmare scenarios, a chapter at a time, covering searing temperatures, crop failures, rising sea levels, fire, dying oceans, poison in the air, disease, economic collapse, regional and global conflict, mass migration. And in case any reader thinks that he's just exaggerating for effect, everything is footnoted. Those notes cover 65 pages of the book. Each set of predictions points to suffering both for our species and everything else that lives on the planet with us. Put it all together, and it's terrifying. I was thinking, in a way, this is nothing new. When in our lifetime has the end of the world not been right around the corner? There's never anything you can do about it. At our workshop last Saturday, some of us admitted that when we hear that some effect is going to come into play by, say, 2060, you get out the mental calculator. In 2060, I'm going to be 105. Well, that's okay. That had nothing to do with me. I don't need to worry about that. And then we feel guilty because underneath our self-centeredness, we know it's not just about us. Normally in church, the message is, do not be afraid. It's what the Bible says over and over again, what Jesus would always say to people. But today I want to argue. We'd be crazy not to be at least a little afraid right now. We need fear's urgency to drive the changes that are necessary if we're going to survive the worst of the scientists' predictions. We need eyes wide open, like young Greta Thunberg. I don't know if you heard her words to the World Economic Forum in Davos. It was January. Our house is on fire. I'm here to say our house is on fire. Now is the time to speak clearly. Adults keep saying, we owe it to the young people to give them hope. But I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And then I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house was on fire. Because it is. Everywhere she goes, Greta speaks the same message. Where is your fear? We're facing a crisis. We need to act now. So the Guardian newspaper announced that it would no longer use the neutral language of climate change, but in future would talk about climate disruption or climate emergency, more disturbing language. In other words, fear is appropriate. Fear is maybe necessary. To escape fear is to close our eyes to a situation that requires our undivided attention. Fear was certainly necessary for our earliest ancestors. When you're being chased by something that wants to eat you, it's good that your heart rate soars and your blood goes to your big muscles. Goosebumps make you warmer. Hyper-alertness to things that go bump in the night warn you that there is something out there bumping in the night. We still experience these symptoms. Welcome to Evolution 101. Guess who survived to pass on their genes? But fear is a mixed blessing. Too much and it incapacitates us, and then we're done for. Too much and it becomes corrosive, which just adds to the problems. But if fear can be the jolt of energy that shocks us out of our complacency into action, then it is for hope. Faith listens to all of that, but still says, don't be afraid. Greta says we have to be afraid. Faith replies, don't be afraid. Biology says when danger is pounding on your door, fear is survival. But faith won't budge. Don't be afraid. The Bible says it, the hymns say it, the stories say it. There is one who has promised to see us through every kind of danger. Put your confidence in God, and so connect with a power even stronger than the power of fear. Connect with courage. By faith, says the book of Hebrews, Noah heeded the warning and built an ark. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to set out, not knowing where he was to go. By faith, Moses left Egypt, unafraid of Pharaoh's anger. By faith, people passed through the Red Sea as if it were dry land. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. And what more should I say? Through faith, our ancestors conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to fight. You get the feeling through the sheer fervor of the preaching that we are not the first generation to need reminding. And we could add a United Church of Christ refrain to the song. By faith, our ancestors defied the old-time religion, setting off across a midwinter ocean on a tiny Mayflower, seeking freedom in a new land. By faith, they were among the earliest and most passionate and tireless voices for the abolition of slavery. By faith, they ordained an African-American man to their ministry, the first, and a woman, the first, and an openly gay man, the first. By faith, they took a stand for marriage equality and kept pushing until it became law. By faith, more recently, they divested from fossil fuels, the first national institution to do so. It all makes for good bragging, but that isn't the point. The point is faith. You can do all those prophetic things, either because you're a bunch of liberal hotheads always looking for the next big cause, or you can do them because there's a spirit bigger than you are, singing a new world into being. And you hear the song and you start singing too. Now in this church, no preacher would get very far just telling people they should believe and everything's going to be okay. I imagine that's been tried from time to time, and I imagine you've all been polite. You're very nice people, but in one ear and out the other. So I'm not going to say that. Just hang on tight and everything's going to be fine. That's denial. And the farther I dig into the climate challenge, the less tolerance I've got for anything that reeks of denial. I don't believe that God is some entity out there considering whether or not to rescue us. God is the fire we feel in our bellies when we hear what's happening. God is the no that wells up from the soles of our feet. God is the invitation that reaches out through our hands to grab hold of other hands. And then God is the unstoppable power changing the world through our willingness, the skills we bring, the policies we develop, the money we offer, the showing up we do, the speaking, the writing, the sharing, the encouraging, the voting, the challenging. So fear. I reckon fear is an invitation too. Fear is when something far away and nothing to do with us becomes real and important and now. Like Eugene Rabinovich waking up to what it would mean for an atomic bomb to fall on a city. Fear is the doorway from business as usual into urgent action. Come on, this way it beckons. And when it has delivered us into awareness and determination, fear has done its job. which is when we choose faith, moment by moment and day by day through victories and setbacks. Faith is a sustaining power. Fear may be the spark that lights the fire in us, but faith is the steady burn that keeps us strong. Fear wakes us up. Faith equips us for the long haul. Maybe another thing fear can do is illuminate everything that faith isn't. All the cheap, worthless answers, the false assurances, the sleepwalking past the point of no return. There's no room in our religion, there's no room in our world for flabby, inadequate faith. Fear probably wouldn't have been our tool of choice, but it does a good job of exposing what's inadequate. We cannot afford to settle for anything less than the power of the Spirit of the living God. So next time you're tempted just to shove fear away, confront it instead. Let it speak to you. And look over its shoulder to where God is waiting with a power you can live by. Amen. Your gifts for the sustaining work of faith in this place will now be received.
Oh